Dr. Peter McCullough is an internist, a cardiologist, and epidemiologist. He maintains an ABIM certification in internal medicine and cardiovascular diseases. He practices both internal medicine and the management of common infectious diseases, as well as the cardiovascular complications of both the viral infection and the injuries developing after the COVID-19 vaccine. And he's in Dallas, Texas. So, Dr. Peter McCullough, please come on up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for that warm welcome and introduction. Thanks to each and every one of you. So as introduced, I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm an academic physician in Dallas, Texas, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm so fired up after that last presentation, huh? Wow, is she high energy or what? So with this is going to be a little bit more in the style of a medical lecture. How many of you are in healthcare? Okay, so about a third of you. So this would be a type of presentation you may go, to the hospital with. There's only two ways to do this lecture. It's either go over the treatment of COVID-19 first or go over the vaccines. The vaccines are, I think, a more charged issue. So I'll follow this outline and make a few points with respect to these bullets, and we'll work our way through it. The first point is that with new biologic products, we must demand safety, safety, safety. It's just like a car. When you buy a car, you demand that it's safe. There are safety standards we must have. Every new drug product, every new vaccine must be safe first. It doesn't matter how good it is, it must be safe, and we have to keep that in mind. These are some screenshots from America Out Loud Talk Radio, and this year I started a podcast radio show. Comes out twice on the weekend and then hits the syndicated circuit on Tuesday. So feel free to follow it. We have not only updates every week, but also question and answer sessions. So if you want to put your question in, and Malcolm Out Loud and myself have done 10 of those, and those are the most popular of all. So the safety, safety, safety is the point. The new biologic products are the vaccines. I was worried last summer before the vaccines came out. And in a series of opinion editorials, I was a regular contributor to The Hill in Washington. I was telling lawmakers that we got a problem. We are gambling in this vaccine development program. It didn't look good from the beginning. There were corners being cut. The development program, normally 24 months of safety, was truncated to 2 months before we could barely even get a look at what was going on with the vaccines. And they had many aspects of the development program that were very, very concerning. The first had to do with the fact that the virus, as we understand it, has a dangerous part to it. Those are the red buds that you see there. It's called the spike protein. The virus is a ball. The surface of the ball is the problem. These spike proteins, these red buds, had been genetically altered and engineered in a lab in Wuhan, China, to be particularly infectious and to be particularly dangerous when they get in the human body. The last thing you want in your body is one of those red buds, let alone billions of them, because those red buds basically damage the brain, they damage the heart, they damage the bone marrow, they can tear up platelets and red blood cells. Very importantly, they damage blood vessels and cause blood clotting. It's all about the spike protein. You'll hear the term spike protein. That's the red on the ball of the virus. The vaccines, and what's shown on the right there is Pfizer and Moderna. They're messenger RNA vaccines. On the left is Johnson & Johnson, outside the United States, AstraZeneca. These vaccines inject genetic material into the human cells, and then the cells produce the red buds, as shown here, the dangerous spike protein. This is the first time in the history of mankind where we give a product and then we take over human cells and have the cells produce a dangerous protein within our bodies. We have never done that before in the history of medicine, never. We've never come close to it. It's almost like a science fiction story going bad. That's what these vaccines do. They are considered genetic transfer technology products. Instead of transferring a normal gene or a good gene or transferring something good into the human body, they are transferring in something that's very damaging to the human body with the goal that the human body would fight off the spike protein and create immunity. when you think about the idea, the gamble of that we're gonna basically give the body a run with what we know now is lethal. The spike protein in some people is lethal, and it's produced for an uncontrolled duration of time, and it's produced in an uncontrolled quantity. Every other vaccine we've ever gotten, it's a specific quantity. All of you have had a tetanus shot. When you get a tetanus shot, you get tetanus toxoid, but a tiny amount of it in a limited quantity. When you get a hepatitis B vaccine, we all got that in healthcare. It's a limited quantity of the hepatitis B antigen. But we don't inject something in the human body that genetically harnesses the cells in the body to have a wild run at producing a dangerous protein. It's never done. It was the biggest gamble ever made in the history of medicine. And I showed you that publication. I called it ahead of time. And I was involved to the best I could to try to warn people that, in fact, that was happening. But it was clear that things were going wrong. We started to see danger signals in March, in April, and by this paper was published in May. This is Bruno and colleagues. It's not just me. It's 57 authors, 17 countries. I'm in the author block, North America, South America, and the European Union. You see the title of the paper. We've got serious concerns about these vaccines. We sent this to every regulatory authority in the world, including the U.S. government, the CDC, and the FDA running our program. We put our stake in the ground. We said, listen, if we can't improve safety in the program, pull these off the market. Just pull them off the market. Our concerns are considerable. The dangerous mechanisms of action. There was no testing to see if they caused birth defects or changed the human genome, caused cancer. There are no safety committees involved with oversight. Normally, we don't have the CDC and FDA run drug programs. The FDA is supposed to be a watchdog. The CDC is supposed to be an outbreak investigation. We should have had a separate group in Washington run the program, and then we should have had unbiased external experts, people like me, to oversee the program and make sure it's safe for Americans. This program from the start was run without a single safety mechanism for the American public. And what's happened is nothing short of astonishing. This paper, done at Harvard School of Medicine, after the release of the vaccines, once they're on the market, proved that the spike protein circulates in the blood after vaccination for 1 to 15 days on average. The longest is 29 days. Now, when these were presented at the US FDA meetings back in November, there was research done at the Salk Institute. They said, no, the vaccine just stays in the arm. It doesn't go anywhere. The spike protein doesn't go anywhere. And, said, listen, this doesn't make sense. In fact, the Japanese, by March, had demanded Pfizer do a study showing, listen, show us where it goes. And Pfizer did a biodistribution study in animals, and it does go everywhere in animals. And what's really disturbing in the Pfizer study is it concentrates in the ovaries of animals. And that was obtained, that was basically Pfizer and the Japanese. It got over to America in April. Now, we have data now from Bruce Patterson showing with the respiratory infection, and the title here of the paper shows it all, that the S1 segment is recoverable in the human body after the respiratory illness up to 15 months after you had COVID. No wonder people have long COVID syndrome. The body is trying to clean out this spike protein that's not supposed to be there 15 months after you've had the infection. Now, I just interviewed Bruce for the McCullough report, and you can go to the website and listen to him firsthand. This guy's top-notch. He trained at Northwestern and University of Michigan and Stanford. This is one of the most brilliant scientists in America. He told me in the vaccinated that as long as he's looking, he's finding the entire spike protein in the vaccinated, the S1 and the S2 segment, for months afterwards. Can you imagine shot 1, a load of spike protein, shot 2, another load of spike protein, and each time it's a year or a year and a half before we clear the spike protein out of the human body? The certainty that we have now, that vaccination given on an every 6-month basis now, the certainty that we have that that will cause chronic disease in the population is enormous. I am telling you, this idea, I was on TV in Australia, and they announced that they had pre-purchased now 14 doses a person, once every 6 months for 7 years. Canada has purchased 5 years worth. The certainty in some people are not going to be able to tolerate it. You're not going to be able to tolerate the spike protein in the brain, the heart, and the bone marrow. And even if the body tries to contain it and fight it off, not everybody's going to be able to fight off the spike protein. That's the problem. That is a giant, giant problem we have with that. And it came out early in the safety review. We've been waiting for a report card. We have seen morning, noon, and night our FDA staffers and our CDC staff people on the major media. Not a single one has come out and given us a report on how the vaccines are doing. They haven't told us, which one's the best vaccine? There's 3 vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J. Isn't one better than the other by this time? Are they all the same? Doesn't it seem odd to you that you're told, take a shot, take any shot? Like your employer said, really, isn't that odd? Your employer tells you, oh, you need to take a vaccine for work. So, don't they care what's the best vaccine? That seems odd. It's absurd, right? There's an absurdity to this whole thing. Of course the vaccines aren't the same. Of course there's differential efficacy. Of course there's differential safety. But with no transparency on what's going on with the vaccines become a blind box. Americans and people all over the world are getting pretty uncomfortable not getting any information on the vaccine. It's in the Supreme Court of India right now. And a little tiger of an old man, his name is Prashant Bhushan, I've interviewed him on the McCullough Report. He is taking to task the Supreme Court of India to just get some transparency on what is going on with the vaccines. What's going on with the vaccines? Do you know in the United States that lead attorney Aaron Siri and Elizabeth Brem have actually sued Pfizer and the FDA for the dossier of the Pfizer program? Pfizer says they have 400,000 pages of data on the vaccines. And what Aaron said, he goes, I want 30 experts in the United States to, as an independent review panel, to review the dossier. I'm one of them. That's how I know. Okay? And do you know what the FDA said? The FDA, not Pfizer, the FDA went to the judge and said, we want to release it in 2076. I'm not going to make it to 2076. How can they? But think about this. That is the reason why people are distrustful of the FDA. How could the FDA possibly give that answer without engendering skepticism and distrust of the public? What are they thinking? What are they thinking? 2076? I mean, a patent life is only 20 years. Why 55 years before we find out what's going on with Pfizer? Well, one of the employees got a little nervous and actually leaked out some of the documents. And now we have literally within a few weeks, Pfizer had like 1,000 deaths on their hands. I mean, it's astronomical, and hopefully it will come clean. But the lack of transparency is a giant issue. This is what we knew. By January 22nd, we had 182 deaths. 182 deaths. We were thinking the whole vaccine program, the whole United States is 150 deaths with 278 million shots, with only 27 million Americans who had taken one of the doses of the vaccine. 182 died, and there were all these other safety events. Now we look at published data on this. 2021, if the COVID-19 vaccines were safe, all those bars would look the same. It's obvious. You don't have to be a scientist to realize 2021, we've got a safety problem with the vaccines. Total reports and deaths are through the roof. There is a giant safety problem. The VAERS system, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, is supposed to be an early warning system. It's supposed to warn our governments and our population when we have an unsafe product. Anybody would look at this figure and say, wait a minute, we have an unsafe product that's entered the U.S. marketplace. It's an early warning system. Now the current numbers, as I've shown you here, this is the most recent one I updated, it's astronomical. The program was never stopped in February like it was supposed to. It was supposed to be stopped in February because people were dying after the vaccine. We now have over 18,000 deaths in the United States. Half of these are domestic, so 9,000 within the U.S. borders, 9,000 through countries who report through our system. You can see all the non-fatal events. 13,000 cases of myocarditis in kids, 13,000. When the FDA reviewed it, they had 200 in June. Now there's 13,000 kids in the hospital with myocarditis, 30,000 people who are permanently disabled. All the action occurs within a few days of the shot. You can see on the right all the different organ systems. It depends where the vaccine goes in the body. That's what organ system is injured. We know the deaths occur very tightly related to the administration of the vaccine. 50% of the deaths occur within 48 hours, 80% of deaths within a week. It's like a cannon shot. that happens. It's obvious some people, their bodies cannot tolerate the vaccines. Now, in an analysis by McCullough and colleagues using the U.S. data back in April, where they reviewed all the deaths and independently and blindedly coded the deaths and adjudicated them in a fair way, McCullough concluded 86% of the deaths had no other explanation other than the vaccines. That's it. Okay? It can't be more clear than that. McCullough went on to show who's dying of the vaccines. Sadly, it's the same people we are trying to protect. It's our seniors. It's our seniors who are dying of the vaccine. It's pretty obvious it's too strong for some of our seniors, and there's an overwhelming production of spike protein, and they die. And in this analysis by Kostoff and colleagues, where the title is about why we're vaccinating children, he did analyze all age groups and showed that the age distribution for deaths after the respiratory illness is the same age distribution shape as those who die after the vaccine. The point is, people die of COVID-19 due to the spike protein on the virus. You die of the vaccine due to the spike protein from the vaccine. It's the same pathophysiologic process. But what Kostoff demonstrated is that using the best case scenario, that one at age 65 is more likely to die of the vaccine than take your choices with getting COVID. And that has to do with determinism. What that means, if you decide to take the vaccine, it's in your body, you can't get it out. If you decide to pass on the vaccine, you can always kind of dodge COVID. There's people in the room here who have never gotten COVID. You've dodged it for 2 years. You've actually kind of figured it out. Okay? So the point I'm making is that this is an unfavorable trade-off. Do you know this analysis was presented by independent presenters at 2 of the FDA meetings in September and October in the public presentation section, and it's not disputed. This is in the peer-reviewed published literature. The FDA and the CDC did not dispute this analysis. Yet, at the same time, your government and the employers are telling you to take the vaccine. And you can say, well, I'm more likely to die with the vaccine than take my chances with COVID. And they're saying take the vaccine. That's the tension that exists right now in the United States, in the world. And the obituaries are pouring in. Look at this guy. He takes the vaccine. He develops one of these immune syndromes, which is awful. He's in the hospital and he's dying and he knows it. And he basically states at the end, listen, learn from my case. If you want to take one of these vaccines, you better be prepared to die as I am. Ask my wife. That's what he said. Now, obviously, a lot of people took the vaccines. We're coming up on 200 million Americans took the vaccines. Obviously, the majority of people who took the vaccines are perfectly fine. But there's 1 million people now who have either been injured, and then sadly, there's a fraction of those who died. That's too much. It's too much, okay? I have to tell you, one time, some people in my circles were biking, and they came by my house, and they're about my age, and they wanted to let me know they took the vaccine. That was in the spring in about March. And here I was on my computer like I normally am working through the data, and I said, well, I'm kind of concerned. In March, we had about 1,200 people who have died. And this guy, he listened to that. He had just taken the vaccine. He goes, well, listen, he goes, we vaccinated 60 million people so far in the United States. He goes, 1,200 people who died. He said, small price to pay. And I finished the thought in my mind. I said, small price to pay for the Aryan race. That's exactly how the thought process was in nascent Nazi Germany among Jews and non-Jews. It's the same way of thinking. The same way of thinking is, I'm going to take this shot. And people say, I took this shot. Listen, I took this shot. Now you take yours. Right? So the most important meme that exists so far, have you seen that meme where the woman's holding her head and she goes, my vaccine doesn't work unless you take yours? Have you seen that one? That's the best one because people know this. In their minds, they know they took a risk. Those people in the boardrooms of the companies that are mandating these vaccines, they all knew they took the risk. I took the risk. I could have died. I'm not going to talk about it, but you got to take the vaccine too. That thinking is a form of in a sense, it's a form of a pathological thinking. in the Judeo-Christian ethic, we never do that, right? So you know the stories about the one sheep. We're going to do everything for the one sheep to bring it back to the herd. We just don't kill off a few to save the masses. This idea of let's just kill off a few people to save our skin. Well, let me tell you what goes around comes around. And as these boosters keep going, I can tell you what, I think we're going to see people sing a different tune. There are brand new syndromes that have developed. This one's called vaccine-induced thrombocytopenic purpura. After about 2 weeks, in some people, if the bone marrow is hit and the right immune processes are there, one develops a hemolytic anemia. They start having blood in their urine. They go into organ failure. This is absolutely terrible. Here's a case, and here's a paper written about a patient like this. This is a woman. She's a 37-year-old mother. She's got kids at home. She doesn't need the vaccine. COVID in her is going to be like a cold. She takes the vaccine, and there's her obituary. She's now dead, and she's left her family behind because she died of vaccine-induced thrombocytopenic purpura. She died of a new vaccine disease. We actually have new diseases in medicine because of the vaccine. Vaccines are not supposed to cause disease. They're supposed to prevent disease. They're supposed to do something good for people, not this. This idea of children and having the vaccine weaponized in the children for myocarditis is probably the biggest issue. The biggest issue. Do you know there are parents and grandparents who say, listen, I'm not going to see the children at Christmas time unless you get them vaccinated? I've had many patients in my practice in tears because they're grandparents and they say, I want to see my grandchildren. Parents say, no, not unless you are vaccinated, not unless the kids are vaccinated, vice versa. But this idea of trying, there's teachers who say, listen, I'm not going in the classroom unless those kids are vaccinated. You know that? I was just at a symposium with Scott Atlas, who was in the White House Task Force. I had dinner with Scott, and we had a chance to interchange ideas. And Scott made a presentation in Columbus, Ohio. He had the data. Do you know the safest occupation in America in terms of being free of COVID? Elementary school teacher, right, and junior high teacher. Why? Because the kids are an immunologic buffer. Do you know at the fall FDA meetings, it's in the meeting minutes, the general agreement is in the FDA meetings that 40% of the kids through May had already had COVID. It's already done. Now through the Delta outbreak, it's 80% of kids. They're done with COVID. It's done. So the kids can't pass it around, and they can't get it because all the kids are back at school and there's no outbreaks. Believe me, you know how kids are. They can't stay away from each other. If COVID, the kids, it's over with. The kids aren't going to get COVID. Do you know in Dallas, the parochial schools never shut down. The public schools did. No difference in outbreaks. Sweden, they never shut it down. Scott Atlas was right. Scott was one of the few voices who said, don't shut down the schools. So we don't need to vaccinate the kids to protect the teachers. We don't need to do that. 80% of kids have had COVID, so they don't need the vaccine. So this idea of kids taking the vaccine. Do you know the World Health Organization has just passed basically a ruling that says if a child shows up to school, that is assent. That is basically a passive consent for the child to be vaccinated without the parents even weighing in on it. Yes, and do you know Canada just enacted that? So Canadian parents are absolutely in a state of terror right now with this idea that their child could go off to school and out of their control, they could be coerced or pressured or forced into a vaccine, and the parents can do nothing about it. We've never been in this type of territory in bioethics at all. What's the problem? Basic science papers like this show the spike protein definitely damages the heart. It damages a cell line called the pericytes. It's without doubt. This paper by Tracy Hogue, University of California, Davis. We're talking about high quality. This would be medical grand rounds, you guys. This isn't my opinion. This is what's published in the peer-reviewed literature. It's all late breaking. I'm a frequent contributor on Fox News, and I think one time I was asked by Laura Ingraham, she goes, Dr. McCullough, how come you know all this information, and how come our FDA and CDC officials, when they go on TV, they don't have any of these citations? I said, Laura, I think they're running about 9 months behind in understanding what's going on. And everyone rolled their eyes like, sure, they must know this. And then when I talked to Scott Atlas, you know what he said? He goes, they don't know this stuff.
The people getting on TV from the CDC, and they actually don't know the data. Scott said he showed up to every meeting with papers in his hands and analyses. He goes, I would do just what like Peter McCullough would do. I have all the information. He goes, and these FDA and CDC officials, the White House Task Force, they showed up with nothing. They actually don't know this. They actually don't know this. What Tracy Hogue showed in children ages 12 to 17 in the VSafe and VAERS data, 86% of these kids with myocarditis, thousands of them require hospitalization. They get really sick with this. Healthy boys have a much higher risk of being hospitalized with myocarditis than ever becoming hospitalized with COVID-19. It's just like the cost-of analysis. And again, the FDA heard this twice this fall, and they didn't dispute it. We never give products to people where they're more likely to hurt than harm. Than benefit. Do you see what I mean? We never do that. Well, what did Hogue show is that myocarditis is explosive after the second shot, way more than boys and girls. And certainly it's going to be way more common than the CDC ever estimated. Now we're hearing reports that, again, that are grotesque. In Toronto, one of the major hospitals had 110 kids hospitalized in the coronary care unit with myocarditis. There was this really disturbing bus logo that was in the UK they showed the other day where it says children have strokes too. Like they're trying to normalize this. Like this is going to become normal. This is really, you can't make this stuff up. This is beyond the limits of what we could ever have imagined, and people are concerned. Look at this case. This is the Koreans. This is a worldwide problem. This is in Korea. They write up a case of a young woman. Again, she has no reason to take the vaccine. She takes the vaccine. She develops myocarditis, and her EKG basically goes into complete pump failure and complete asystole. She has to go on ECMO. And you know, ECMO is an advanced life support machine where the blood is bypassed out of the body, and they do 10 minutes of CPR, and they save her. They save her. Again, she doesn't need to go through this. This case, the next case, wasn't so lucky. This is a 22-year-old man. He develops about 5 days of chest pain, comes in the hospital 7 hours later, he's dead. This is the analysis of his heart tissue. He's loaded with myocarditis. He's loaded with inflammation. In fact, it has a conduction system. This myocarditis is a killer. It's going to kill some kids. It's without a doubt, it will kill kids. Washington University in St. Louis, the New England Journal of Medicine reported, a young person who died this summer, American. The Koreans are going to report it. If the children are marched into vaccination, it will happen in some. And this will be this tragic loss of life that we definitely shouldn't have in the United States. So if we don't have any control over our pharmaceutical laws, we're in trouble. And this type of grotesque thing is going to happen. These are two CNN correspondents who are on Sesame Street, and they're trying to seduce the children into taking the vaccine. We have laws in the United States. We have the U.S. Drug and Cosmetic Act. We have the Lanham Act that says every pharmaceutical product has to be in fair balance. We have to present the risks and the benefits. This isn't fair balance. This is pure seduction on something that is frankly dangerous to these kids. And I tell you, these two correspondents should go down in the history of biopharmaceutical malfeasance. Malfeasance is a strong word, but malfeasance is considered wrongdoing by those in position of authority. Sanjay Gupta and the other CNN correspondents, because they're in the media, they're in a position of authority. Listen, I'm a doctor. I'm a pretty prominent doctor in the United States. I'm in a position of authority. This is really important, and that authority matters. It really matters. I was on Tucker Carlson, and I was trying to explain to him what's going on, and he started getting worked up. At one point in time, he just looked at the camera. He goes, if you don't know who this doctor is, you better go look him up. He has authority. And I said, I kind of like that. I do have authority. And you know what? I know, and I'm going to take it. Very, very important. 2 days ago, Judge Foudy in Louisiana wrote a 34-page decision to strike down the Biden CMS vaccine mandates. He cited two doctors. And you'll see us on Fox News because we're part of the frequent contributor group, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya out of Stanford and myself out of Dallas. And I have to tell you, that is a turning point in U.S. history. It's going to go to the Supreme Court. But that's what I mean about authority. Each one of you has authority. It's not just me. Each one of you has authority. Now start to feel your power. Feel your power and feel your authority. It's stronger, way stronger than what you think. It's very important. Feel your power. You have power in every single conversation you have. Feel your power in the way you carry yourself. The next time your doctor tells you to take the vaccine, look them straight in the eye, hand them a safety report. Tell them, which red box do you want me in, doctor? How can I help you get out of your trance? You need to start using your power and do it. It's very, very important. That's authority. That's authority. And do you know what the authority is? You know what the authority really is? It's called moral authority. It's moral authority. I went on, I do a lot of interviews. I become very agitated that something's wrong in the world. And I had a lot of interviews. And I'm doing it because it's important. And if somebody doesn't step up, we're going down a very, very bad pathway, and everybody can feel it. Just go look at what's going on in Europe and Australia, and you realize we don't want that in America. And that's the reason why I am going absolutely nuts every day in the media to the extent that I can. But I had a rough interview, and it was with Hugh Hewitt on the radio. Some of you know Hugh. And he let me know he's an attorney, and he wanted everybody to take the vaccine, and he thinks the vaccine is good for everybody. And he goes, Dr. McCullough, I have to ask you, if someone listens to you and they don't take the vaccine and they die of COVID, that's on you, Dr. McCullough. And I said, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Attorney Hewitt. That's called moral authority. Well, let me tell you this. These vaccines are research. They're experimental. Nobody can encourage their use. That violates the Nuremberg Code, a code of ethics. No one may receive any pressure, coercion, or threat of reprisal because they are research. That came out of Nazi Germany doctors putting pressure on patients in Nazi Germany to participate in their diabolical research, and they pushed patients into it. They seduced them into it. This seduction occurred in Nazi Germany. And I told him, listen, Hugh Hewitt, if they listen to you and they take the vaccine and they die, like 18,000 people have done already, that's on you. Okay? And that is moral. That's moral authority. That's moral authority. We don't use moral authority to harm people. That's what Adolf Hitler did. That's what happens in these mass suicides that happen in these religious cults. That's using moral authority to the detriment of people. That's what's going on with the vaccine program. I am expressing concern. I am a concerned doctor. Sometimes I talk to my friends. Listen, there's only 500 doctors right now in the United States that knows what's going on. One of them is Dr. Teresa Long, who's in the military, a very courageous lady. And we asked each other, what if we're wrong? 1 million doctors think just take the vaccine. 1 million doctors think it's all fine. But 500 of us are worried. What if we're wrong? Do you know the same doctors who are worried about the vaccine are the same doctors who treat COVID-19 as an illness? We're the same group. So we believe COVID-19 should be treated to prevent hospitalization and death, and we're worried about the vaccine. But the rest of the doctors think, don't treat COVID-19, let it slaughter their patients, let her slaughter America, and then take the vaccine. So we're completely opposite one another. And I said, what if we're wrong? And what I said, if we're wrong, the sin that I have committed is that I overtreated some patients with some benign generic drugs because I was trying to help them. Okay? And the other sin that I had is I was excessively worried about a vaccine that was perfectly safe and perfectly effective. That's actually the moral sin. But if I'm right, then anybody who's not active on this has been a passive contributor to what has basically become a mass assassination. Okay? People have been slaughtered with the virus, and now they're being slaughtered with the vaccine. When I testified in the U.S. Senate in November of 2020, I told America, based on our learning curve and the research that we had done, that 50% of Americans could have been saved with early treatment. I gave that testimony under sworn oath. And then by March of 2021 in the Texas Senate, again under sworn oath, I upgraded it because we were better. We had monoclonal antibodies. We had all kinds of additional drugs. 85% of people could have been saved of COVID-19 if every doctor in America had operationalized early treatment, as I had taught America and the world how to do. I wasn't the only one to think the vaccines weren't safe. This is an evidence-based consulting group in the UK. They analyzed the yellow card system. Their report, vaccines are not safe for human use. They sent this to the MHRA, which is like the FDA of England, this summer. They knew it wasn't safe. Citizen petition groups. I led the one with the doctors, and Linda Westila and Peter Doshi, who's the associate editor of British Medical Journal. We are fairly highly ranked doctors in the United States. We told the FDA these are not safe enough for approval. And we had a nursing group do it as well. They agreed. But no one thought the vaccines would fail to the extent we did. Henry Ely, who's a naturopathic doctor, very brilliant doctor, is on faculty at MD Medical School, has shown we're now at about 1 million vaccine failures across the United States and 1 million vaccine injuries. We hit that landmark. Now, importantly, the vaccines do something. It's not as if the vaccines don't do something, but it's been pretty late in telling the story. What we know from the VA, this is a very large study, that there is a benefit. Those who choose the vaccine over 65, the effect of the vaccine itself on mortality with COVID-19 is about 1.5%. Now, it turns out even for non-COVID illnesses, there's a mortality benefit because people who choose the vaccines tend to be healthier people than those who don't choose the vaccines. So the vaccines do something, but look at the left-hand panel. What happened in September? All the vaccines ran out of gas. Everybody took the vaccines in December, January, February, and March, and then we get to the 6-month mark, all the vaccine coverage fell dramatically. Now, Moderna is always a little bit better than the other vaccines because it's 100 micrograms of messenger RNA. Pfizer's only 30 micrograms. So the vaccines do protect against mortality with COVID-19 a little bit. And I'm talking a little bit, 1.5% absolute risk reduction. See if I can get this to move. There we go. This paper just came out, New England Journal of Medicine. I wanted to share it with you. This is, again, the VA, just comparing Pfizer and Moderna together. The point is, look at all these graphs. Everybody taking the vaccine thinks they're going to get wiped out with COVID. This is the VA. This is a huge sample size. Look at every single risk of COVID-19 is less than 1%. Everybody taking the vaccine, 99% of people who are taking the vaccine are never going to come into contact with COVID. Do you see what this means? This is the people who take the vaccine think they're going to the next day get blasted with COVID. This has just been published. Every single COVID event is less than 1%, and the differences are minuscule between the two products. Here's a paper from Sweden, Nordstrom and colleagues, 1.6 million pairs. Look how Pfizer, Moderna basically run out of coverage after 6 months. That's the reason why now we have a situation. We have 22 studies say every 6 months we have boosters. Vaccines are not viable if they can't last a year, right? It would be up that the minimum criterion to accept a vaccine in your life is 50% coverage, and it must last a year. These aren't cutting it. None of these products are viable to be commercial products. That's the reason why none of them are FDA approved. None of them are actually fully FDA approved. These two papers, VAERS from the CDC on the left and Fillmore from the VA on the right, showed through June we had a problem. We had, in June, we had 23% of those hospitalized had been vaccinated. So the vaccines were failing, even though the hospital administrators were saying it's 99% unvaccinated at the hospital. It wasn't true. We knew that. And then we knew that something was happening. We were fooling with Mother Nature, and by vaccinating large numbers of individuals, the spike protein was mutating and finding a way to dodge the antibodies of the vaccine. This was shown in a paper from Mayo Clinic. So it made sense that the vaccines weren't going to work long term because of this. The viral landscape changed to basically we have 99% Delta. The Delta variant is super dominant because the virus learned how to thrive in those who took the vaccine. That's bad news for everybody since Delta was, in my view, a very hard variant. This paper from the University of Wisconsin Department of Public Health shows, you can tell those two graphics there, among the vaccinated and unvaccinated, they have equal viral loads, and they're very high with Delta, and they're equally as infectious. This idea that any employer would require somebody to take a vaccine so somehow they're safer doesn't hold any water. Look at, they're teeming with virus. If someone gets COVID, they're the same. the vaccines don't stop transmission or carriage of the virus. It's very, very important. What we need to know is the most important thing is just to stay home when you're sick. This paper just came out with New England Journal of Medicine. I added it on the way over here. My wife drove, and bless her heart, we were stuck on the country roads getting back here because of a couple tough turns. But look at the data. Unvaccinated or vaccinated, you can see there's more vaccinated in this sample, but basically maybe taking a vaccine shaves off a day or two of symptoms, maybe. But in the bottom it said, listen, there's no difference across the board. The vaccines fundamentally don't have much of an impact against COVID-19. It's small. There is something there, but it's small. I'm not saying they don't work. It just doesn't drop things to zero. It's not like a polio vaccine where you take a polio vaccine, you're not going to get polio. It's not like that. The vaccines are just not that good enough. And now we're hit with this. This is Omicron, right? The new variant, that now there's a new variant, and within 48 hours, every vaccine manufacturer said that we all are going to have to take now a new vaccine to cover Omicron. This one is just out of the gate. It's a heavily mutated form. I was on Laura Ingraham this week, went over it for America in the midweek. You can see the clip where I think this is an evolutionary mistake. It's not a transformer, though. It sounds like a transformer. Paul Alexander, who wrote this, he is a small boy, and I think his son gave him the idea, Dad, Omicron sounds like Megatron or something. It's not a transformer. Now, we must pivot to early treatment. I testified in the U.S. Senate. I said, listen, if I was running the show in Washington, we've always had 4 pillars. We'd have a team of doctors working on reducing the spread of illness, a team working on early treatment, a team working on late treatment, and a team working on herd immunity. There would have been teams of competent doctors. I would have gladly dropped what I was doing in Dallas and go to Washington to help out, and I would have made it international. When was the last time you saw a team of doctors on TV from Washington deliberating and delivering to America a better approach for the pandemic? When's the last time you saw on TV any international collaboration? The most inflammatory thing I've said on Fox News, and I try to be very politically correct, Laura Ingraham always gets frustrated with me because I'm careful, is I said one time America's been looking at a dictator. A dictator who's a smallish person from a smallish position who now is in a position of power. A person who says they themselves are science. Doesn't this sound familiar to another smallish person in the 1930s who came from a smallish position into a position of power, and he basically got to the point where it was almost worship and demagoguery? What is the difference? I mean, these parallels are just unmistakable right now. Vaccinated or not, we need to treat patients early. We always should have, and I've never turned down a patient. These are the 2 seminal papers that I published teaching the world how to treat COVID-19 and using precautionary principle, all the available evidence. We took acceptable safety, used drugs in combination. We weren't going to wait for large randomized clinical trials. We know the virus proliferates. We know there's inflammation or cytokine storm and thrombosis. It's complicated. A single drug can't treat COVID. We got to use a lot of drugs, and we have to use it early in order to save lives. It's hard. COVID's the hardest thing I think I've ever treated, because it's a complicated illness. Well, it's the first time we saw a virus that causes blood clots. So, of course, we have to use blood thinners. This is sequenced multi-drug therapy. I'm not going to go through it for the sake of time, but the protocols now are extensive. There are treatment organizations. There are doctors who treat COVID-19. You can go to the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, American Frontline Doctors, Frontline Critical Care Consortium, and Truth for Health Organization. And honestly, it should be every doctor's office in America ought to have this up on the board so they know how to treat COVID-19. Thank you. We have very good additions. One addition is the new monoclonal antibodies, GlaxoSmithKline, approved in May, Sotrovimab. I want to show you how good some of these drugs are. I send patients for monoclonal antibody infusions all day long. In this randomized trial, New England Journal of Medicine, what we found is that there was an 85% reduction in hospitalization death with the monoclonal antibodies. Get them early. High-risk seniors, get them a monoclonal antibody infusion. We use other drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, colchicine, prednisone, because the FDA tells us to. This is the FDA regulations saying doctors use drugs off their original advertising label when you're filling an unmet need. So any doctor under threat of a medical board will come into their hearing to say, listen, I'm following the FDA regulations on this. This is a home treatment guide, AAPSonline.org, used in every household in America. We need to use drug treatment. By the way, we feature early oral nasal decontamination now with dilute betadine or dilute hydrogen peroxide. We know we can kill the virus in the nose and the mouth before it takes off into the body. Everybody tonight who's still susceptible, you ought to go home, do a little nasal spray, do a little mouth rinse, and keep COVID out of your system. COVID takes 3 to 5 days in the nose and mouth before it invades the body. We treat the viral infection to handle the pandemic crisis. It works. Groups in Italy, they crushed their Delta curves. Eric Grimaldi, one of my colleagues there, they use a hydroxychloroquine-based protocol. They're down to 0 hospitalizations in a lot of these European cities. I mean, done a terrific job. We showed Brian Proctor here in Plano, Texas. Even our early protocols, Proctor's data, we reduced hospitalization and death by 85%. Brian Proctor and his team. Same thing, Vladimir Zlenko showed the same thing. Didier Rialt in France showed the same thing. The best comparative data, early multi-drug treatment is a modern-day miracle. The only people being hospitalized in the United States are people who do not receive early treatment. Now, we know to get the other side of natural immunity is really important. This is Paul Alexander. We have now 128 studies supporting natural immunity. And finally, the CDC admits you can't get it twice. You can't get it twice. They've been telling Americans, oh, watch out, wear a mask, you can get it again, take a vaccine. So wait a minute, I had COVID-19, I can't get it again. You know you can't get it again. Grandma has COVID-19, it's one and done. If you could, it would have swept through the nursing homes over and over again. The CDC now tells us 146 million Americans have had COVID. That's through May. We're probably up to 200 million people that do not need to wear masks, never need to take a vaccine, don't have to worry about social distancing, go see your family at Christmas time. If you've had COVID, it's one and done, and you don't have to worry about it. Diana Hirschberger's got the right idea. National legislation. We should be able to get on a plane without none of this testing or anything else. Natural immunity works. Now, if you're naturally immune and you're forced to take the vaccine, 3 studies show you're going to be damaged, you're going to be harmed. Last thing we want is someone who's had COVID to take a vaccine. It shouldn't happen. FDA agrees. Why are we all here tonight on a Friday night? Because your freedom's at risk. Somehow your freedom now is tethered to a hypodermic needle, and we're all concerned. If we break the medical freedom, it's going to encroach into our social freedoms. We already see this, right? Take the shot or lose your job. You lose your job, then you lose your economic freedom. You can see that, right? And so people say, Dr. McCullough, I'm going to lose my job. I said, well, if you take the shot, what do you get? You get 3 months of work? 6 months? What do you get? Well, say, well, I don't know. You can see how absurd this is. You're being asked to take a potentially lethal injection, but you don't know what you get out of it. It's almost like we're in a movie. This censorship has led to basically incredible. Ron Johnson's an American hero. He's trying to break through this. It's obvious everybody is involved, the media and social media, to censor us. It's obvious that we know about the Trusted News Service, which is basically going to block anything on vaccine safety, anything on medical treatment in order to wildly promote the vaccine. This was announced in December, you guys. This was wide open. Everybody agreed this was going to be a railroad job of the vaccines on the world population, not just the U.S. We were crushing the lifeblood of medical science. It's nearly impossible to publish a paper on early treatment. We have 15,000 papers in the literature on vaccines, less than 5,000 on treatment. Okay, I can tell you right now, it is brutal to get a paper published because anything on vaccine safety is going to be censored. The only thing we can do is take our message through the media. That's what we're doing tonight. Dr. Artis just came in from Missouri. Tomorrow I'm going to Chicago. We are doing everything we can on our own time and our own dime in order to try to save the country. Very, very important. We want to get to the point because here's the issue. The issue is if we don't do something now, if each one of you don't go out and do something now, we're going to end up like Melbourne. Melbourne, they can't even leave their houses. They don't even have any COVID. They have more people dying of the vaccine than COVID. That's how distorted the thinking is right now. We have to do something. If you want to know what's going on, check out, this is one of many books now. This is Peter Breggin, COVID-19, the Global Prayer. It's got 1,000 references. It's just factually showing how this was all set up and being executed. Bobby Kennedy's book is out. I think I'm the most heavily mentioned physician in Bobby Kennedy's book about the history of what's going on. Now's a time for everybody to be galvanized and start to do something. Your critical conversations couldn't happen soon enough. I want to finish and conclude by saying COVID-19 pandemic is a global disaster. Its pathophysiology is complex. We have to treat before the hospital in order to stop these hospitalizations and deaths. The COVID-19 vaccines have an unfavorable safety profile. They don't protect well enough against the COVID-19 and don't last long enough, and censorship is trying to crush our existence right now. I had a wonderful but very short night in a cabin in Independence, Kansas, and I met Jan Ailson, who's a wonderful lady, and I was stared at this painting for a while in the living room. I was dead tired. I got there at 1 a.m. and I had a 4 a.m. Pickup time, so I had just a few hours, but I thought about this painting, and I saw that angel weighing this out, and I said, that's actually weighing the risks and benefits. That was what we did tonight, and there we are. We're going to roar like a lion, and that's what we need to do. So I'm going to say that with every bit of scientific and medical integrity that I have, every bit of moral, ethical, and civil responsibility that I have and you have, join me in calling for a drop in the vaccine mandates immediately. Join me in prohibiting all forms of pressure, coercion, or threat of reprisal on the vaccine within your family, within the schools. Ban all forms of vaccine discrimination, and we need to pause. Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, they need to come off the shelves, and we need a very detailed safety review. I'm not against the vaccines, maybe Novavax, there's 27 vaccines in development, but these need to go right now. Begin vaccine injury treatment centers at major medical centers, and we need a nationwide pivot to early treatment. So those are my messages tonight. Thank you.